Well. Katya, we're here.
We are here. We made it, Darian.
We made it. We finally get to chat. How are you today?
I'm feeling pretty sunny. It's beautiful outside of my windows. I'm grateful for the sunshine, for the ability to get outside, take a walk, and then be present here with us together today.
You have this light about you. I feel it. There's something there. There's a happiness factor there. There's something going
Ah,
on.
a bit of joy, you might say.
There's, that's a nice segue, right? Let's talk about joy. Let's talk about your joy and how you came to the work that you've been doing.
Mm, beautiful question. What a genesis of a question. To catch folks up who are tuning in, grateful that you're here. Recently, I wrote a book on joy, on celebrating the tiny moments that make us wonder and pause to appreciate all the tiny little moments that really truly make us feel human. And as many of us may relate, the last 2 years, y'all, they have been a whirlwind to say the least, especially in the polemical nature of the last couple of weeks themselves. There have been many opportunities for us not to feel joy. Derry, I'm curious, you kind of also strike me as a very joyous, happy, charismatic person.
Yeah.
Have you felt kind of prickly, tingly, over the last 2 years?
Yeah, from time to time, for sure. Like anyone. I feel like
Yeah.
but it's there's a lot to be thankful for too.
Mhm.
A lot,
Mhm.
sometimes it's so easy to get pulled towards the negative things or things that are conflict, and that's part of life, that
Mhm.
conflict. But there's also a lot of goodness and joy in there too.
Absolutely. And so, like many of us, I found myself kind of in this pretty big slump. I was working in people operations, which was amazing. That's my life's work. So I'm a leadership development facilitator currently. In my past, I'd worked in people operations for several tech companies, and so my whole goal was to help other people thrive in the workplace. Because Darian, one of my life philosophies is if we spend so much of our lives working, shouldn't we find joy and meaning and purpose and love and happiness in what we do? Seems like a no brainer, right? Seems
Yeah.
like the answer is, well, duh, of course. And so over the last couple of years, been feeling this really pull towards a heaviness from the pandemic, from several decisions, just swirling in the world. I was like, wow, the color feels like it's kind of drained from life, from the environment. So how can I change it? And I realized that in the midst of all this swirliness, my company was going through a merger. We had entered the pandemic. The world was shutting down. People were losing their social connections. So loneliness set in. Adam Grant's philosophy or concept of languishing set in, where folks no longer felt like they were thriving. They were just barely trying to survive. And again, I think that may probably resonate with a lot of folks, even if they're happy by nature, even if their like underlying core is charisma. And so I was like, well, okay, cool. Let's just move to Cabo, forget that all these worries existed, and just start a new life. But of course, that's not possible, right? Of course, that's the stuff of dreams. If we could all move to Cabo and have a restart, have a refreshed outlook on life, then we'd all be doing it. But of course, it's easier said than done. So, like, what if there were those little moments that make us pause in awe, in wonder, in just appreciation, like you said, of all the beautiful things about there that exist in our daily routines? And that's how this idea of little tiny joys was born. I'll pause here because I've unloaded quite a bit at us here.
Yeah. Well, seems like, well, have you always, all right, let me take this back here. Like, you come on and you have a great presence. You have a light, like I said, this
Mm,
light.
thank you.
But I wonder, has that light always been there, or is this something you have really worked on to
Mm.
develop?
Yeah. Great question. Makes me think of the nature versus nurture question,
Mhm.
right? Like how much of our expression is due to genetics, how much of it is due to our upbringing and our environment. As a kid, I'll be honest, I was called the optimist. I remember in high school, I joined the optimist club in order to kind of make the environment of my fellow high school classmates a little bit better. It was a club where honestly, it was just a bunch of friends who got together to, uh, you know, talk every Friday during the time that it was club hour. But I always had a smile on my face. In fact, I remember my peers saying like, Katya, you always seem to have found the silver linings in things. I was like, yeah, awesome. That's a great identity to have until it wasn't. And I know this sounds like a bit of like a novel, right? She had all this until it got stripped away. It's not exactly how it happened, but I think especially again, due to the pandemic, due to the nature of working 15-hour days, all of that became so much harder. So because I was and am an immigrant, I came to the States when I was just 7 years old. I kind of had this ethos of we grew up really poor. We didn't really have much. We had to stand in line for food back in my home country, and that was really hard. And so when I came to America, I was like, wow, abundance. You can literally get anything you want at the grocery store and not have to, bribe the
Nobody
salesman.
thinks about
Uh,
that though. Like it's so funny.
yeah.
Like in America, you're so like conditioned to, in a different way. When people
hmm
come here, immigrate, it's such a different mind-blowing experience
hmm
because it's,
hmm
you grow up, you think, oh, it's the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff there, no big deal.
Right. 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 And it's exactly to your point, Darian. It's those things that become normalized in our daily routines.
Yes.
We wake up, we go to work, we drink coffee, we might swing by the store on the way back, make dinner, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Right. And it's in these very routines. I wondered, okay, well, if the world seems kind of dark, if I myself am kind of feeling in a darker spot, and I'll explain exactly what that meant, how do I uncover that joy in the ordinary moments? And I'll share with you candidly that during the time of the pandemic, there were moments where after working 10, 15 hours, I was like, I need to take a break. Because you and I are both very sort of fitness and health oriented. I'm someone who tends to work out every day because it brings me happiness. It kind of rejuvenates the body, the spirit, the mind. So I remember sitting there on the driveway in between my, 15-hour workday. I was like, I just need to take a break. But I had no physical, no mental, no emotional energy to do a single push-up. This is something that I had been doing for years. It was part of my daily routine. I just had no gumption. So I remember sitting there on the driveway crying. I was like, what is happening, Katya? What is going on right now? Called my partner. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I just cannot do this. So that was my little driveway moment. And then the theme of burnout entered the stage. Now, burnout is probably something that for folks who are listening, maybe a pretty familiar thing. Darian, is that something that you've heard in other conversations with past podcast guests that they've also brought up?
Sure. Of course. Yeah. I think
Mhm.
it's a pretty regular thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes part of our vernacular, right? Part of our lived experience. And I was like, this is not a way to live. So despite all of the good things that were probably out there in the world, I couldn't see it. So it was almost like a veil was over my face. And where did all the color, where did all the vivacity, the joy go? And so instead of moving to Cabo, I was like, what if I were to explicitly be deliberate and focusing on my routines? So in the mornings before work, and I still do this to this day, I go on a walk at least 15 minutes just to reset, to be able to prime my mind to jump to the workday. And then on those walks, saw the same things that I saw every single day. Hummingbirds zipping by, very lucky to live in California where hummingbirds are abundant. Maybe in the fall, I stepped on a particularly crunchy leaf and just felt, wow, this feels really good. Maybe I saw the same oak tree that I'd passed over and over and over again, 20 times before, 50 times before. But maybe that morning there was something new about it. Maybe the shape of the leaves, maybe the way that the light hit the trees. And over time, I began to realize that if I were to pay attention to these tiny little moments, then maybe I could prime myself to be in the mindset of appreciating those small moments. And that's how the concept of how do we find those tiny joys in plain sight was born. I'll pause here because
I'm a big listener. I like to really listen and take in what people telling me there.
yeah.
Because I think when you listen and you're thoughtful in your responses, it's part of joy,
Mhm.
drinking in what someone tells you
Mhm.
versus thinking, what am I going to say
Yes.
with this person for
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
So when someone, let's say they come to you and they are, let's say the opposite of you, right now.
The opposite of this iteration of me.
Yeah, the opposite of what I'm seeing currently.
Sure.
What is the first thing that you talk about with it? Because for some people, seeing the little joys could feel like a mountain to them, climbing a
Mhm.
mountain when everything else feels like it's falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very real thing. I want to caveat this by saying that deliberately looking for joy is not a panacea for things like depression or generalized anxiety disorder or any of the other things that make our perception and our lived experience of the world a different color, perhaps a darker color. And I will also say that I'm not a medical doctor or a psychiatrist to be able to kind of work through it. And yet, I also know that the very last thing that I sometimes want to do when I'm kind of in those pits of spiraling is to say, okay, Katya, just articulate the positive. You'll be fine. It's kind of like that statement, oh, you're sad, just be happy.
Yeah.
We know that that doesn't work.
Right.
Right. So what I like to think about and what I like to kind of empathize with other folks in kind of helping them to see those little tiny joys is to say, why does it matter to them? Why does it matter that they want to go towards something that's a little bit more colorful, towards a life, or at least even a moment, 1 minute out of their day that has a little bit of levity to it? Maybe they want to feel better. Maybe they want to show up better for their spouses, their loved ones, their colleagues, their parents, whomever it may be. So finding that why, for me, that why was that I just felt this acute discomfort with the way that I was showing up to the world. And Darian, I'll share with you now that this is a process, like especially over the last week, I have felt this acute discomfort that the world is a little scary. It's a world that I don't really recognize anymore. And I'm, trying to be as transparent as possible here. Like, what is going on here?
Sure.
But I also know that a lot of the way that we live our world is based on our perceptions. There's like the capital T truth and the lowercase t truth. I like to think in those types of philosophical lenses. But a lot of our perception, a lot of our lived experience is how we perceive the incoming stimuli that our brain processes. So I like to think of mindset as a lens through which we see those experiences, those perspectives.
It was fascinating is, I want to say it's a gentleman, Dr. Robert Hoffman. He talks about consciousness. He's a pretty hardcore scientist, but he has deduced that from 1987 on that consciousness it's not the hard science that we think it is, that it's more of that our consciousness creates what we see for that. So essentially our perception, we may see a decision made on a larger scale about something, could be upsetting, right? In the case of many court decisions that we're hearing. But there's also the lowercase t of the things that are happening in your daily life. And there's often something else that is available to tap into. So we look at this macro thing, but on the micro level, have we actually looked into what all these things mean on a daily basis? Have we demystified the process of life? I don't think we demystify life. We look at pop culture and different things, and we don't look further than the surface level of those things. And so we create our perception based off of the surface level and not on what is behind. I call it the Wizard of Oz effect.
Yes.
No one looks to see if the wizard is real or if what's the reality behind the wizard. They just look at the wizard as this big huffy puffy thing, type of thing. So anyways, I just wanted to add that to perception for that. Okay, it's upsetting. There's certainly lots of things that are upsetting lately. But what else is behind that we need to look at as well within that?
And on top of that, what else is behind that? It's understanding what we are responsible for or can control on the one hand versus what we cannot control on the other hand. Going back to the Supreme Court decisions earlier this week, when I heard that news, I'll be honest, I was kind of numb because by this point, there's been so much polemical bad news in the world that I was like, oh, okay, another cherry on top of this Sunday. And then I began to unpack that. I was like, oh shit, now these feelings are kind of coming full force, full spectrum. And yet, what can I do about it in the moment? In the macro perspective, to your point, I can vote, right? I can go out, I can let voices be known, elevate other voices. But at that moment that I received the news, I could breathe. I could call a friend. I could get outside. All those, I think that in my view, life is made of these tiny little micro moments that we stitch together with our own layer of meaning. Like what matters to us? How might these moments impact us when we're on our deathbeds? We're 90 or 100 or 110 years old. We're looking back through the funnel of our lives. What was most meaningful? And the things that
you may feel like you're getting served a shit Sunday. You're like, wow, this I definitely didn't want this. And I believe a majority of people have not been happy with what's been going on. I think most people want to live a good life. they live in a very moderate sense of living, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so hearing a big news thing, it's upsetting, it can be upsetting.
Mhm.
But what's within your power? What do you do on a daily basis to in your lived reality for that? That's one version of reality.
Yes.
But
Yes.
and it is
Exactly.
upsetting. I'm not I'm validating that it's very upsetting. It was definitely upsetting to me.
Mhm.
But there's also a lived reality that we have to focus on too. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And the focus piece is what's really interesting to me. So it feels like over the last decade or two, it was actually the term was coined in the 1980s. It's this concept of the attention economy, right? Where
Mm,
we have so much stimuli coming in through our
yes.
brains, and it becomes very hard to focus on our work, on our kids, on our loved ones. It's it's almost that feeling of being completely frazzled, right? Like a static
Mhm.
television where there's just too much going on. And so our attention tends to plummet, our focus tends to plummet. In fact, when research was conducted on the attention of knowledge workers in an average workplace, it found that about every 3 minutes in a given hour, interruptions happened.
Yeah.
Whether it was external interruptions like Slack or pings or texts, or self interruptions, which is fascinating, right? So we only have a limited amount of attention in a
Mhm.
given 3 minute period. But what's the good news there? The good news is that researchers are kind of hinting at, and it is also my belief that we can train attention like a muscle. So the more that we train our brains to focus on the things that we can control, on the bright spots, the more we're likely to see them, right? Darian, I want to share with you this kind of, I think about perception and assumptions quite a bit. Let's say let's say you and I, we assume that most people are good. Do you assume that to be the
I
case?
do actually, yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
And so because you assume that most people are good, it's probably why you encounter so many people, so many good, kind, knowledgeable, wise people. It's probably in part due to why your podcast is so successful, where you've had over 400 of these types of conversations where you're building and learning about the world in the way that you have. On the flip side, what if we were to take that same assumption, right? Because our lives are guided by assumptions. What if we were to take a similar assumption and say, I assume that there is at least one little sparkle, at least one moment in my day, no matter how big, no matter how small, that makes me pause, that makes me appreciate what I have, whether it's a crunchy bagel, whether it's a really nice smile or a pleasant exchange with a loved one or a coworker, whether it's someone said hello to us on Slack from whom we haven't heard from in a while, right? Those are the little micro moments that make up a good life. And so if we can assume that all these moments exist out there waiting for us to find them, then what does that make us? That makes us treasure hunters, right? We're finding the little treasures in those everyday moments, in the routine specifically. We're not waiting to move to Cabo. We're not trying to completely upend our lives. All we can do is pay attention to the things that ultimately matter most to us.
Yeah. I feel like you've talked about this a lot. You know, like,
I am a professional facilitator
yeah,
by day,
it's like
but
very
yes.
obvious you've talked about this like a lot. There's a presentation feel to this.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Actually,
I
honestly, I'll be honest. I'm not sure what to make of it. I mean, I think it's good.
Mhm.
But if I feel like you've talked about this a lot.
I
Yeah,
have. I
yeah.
have.
And it's good. Like you've talked to people, like rooms of people, and they're like,
Mhm.
different companies and stuff like that. And it's
Mhm.
good. And I'm curious, maybe, okay, let me back up here. I wonder what people think when they meet you. Like,
Mhm.
I wonder what people think. Like, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think I like to dissect stuff like this. Like
Yes.
something I get a feeling about a person. I'm like, I need to discuss this about this person.
Well, Darian, before I answer that question, I'd love for you to answer the question because we have just met and this is
Mhm.
just a very
Yeah,
auspicious sort
yeah,
of time.
yeah. I think, like you seem like a very genuine person, but it just seems like you've talked about this a lot. like, like professionally,
Yeah.
it feels very
Mm.
professional.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
also feels sincere at the same time.
Mm.
Sometimes it could sound professional and sound
Sure.
fake at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, like, sometimes when somebody's like, you seem like a really positive person. but you acknowledge that things are tough,
Mhm.
but you overwhelmingly seem very positive, which is beautiful. And I
Thank you.
wonder how people take that when they meet you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
me, I just had those are my thoughts about it,
I appreciate you sharing that. That gives me a nice perspective on just a person entering into my life and having their perception
Yeah.
be shared. I am hyper aware of the concept of toxic positivity, of not
Mm.
being overly effusive and saying, rah, rah, the world's great. Yes, there's shit, but we're totally fine, right? Because we're not. Like
Yeah.
the democracy as we know it is at stake. A lot of people's lives, a lot of people's rights are at stake. And that's, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on there,
Yeah, say
but
whatever.
that's fucking hard. And that
No,
sucks, right?
no.
And so I think to answer your question, most people when they meet me, they do see this smiley face because I do present as pretty
Yeah,
positive because I genuinely think there is a lot to be grateful for.
I agree.
And at the same time, I believe in the power of sharing the stories of darkness because each of us has those.
Yeah.
Like I was as many of us tend to do, and I'll call myself out on it, was mindlessly scrolling on Instagram today. And I came across this actress who was in a show I'm watching. I'm like, wow, her entire feed is this beautiful, glammed up. She's skinny, she's blonde, she's tall. She's like the iconic Instagram girl, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, tell me the bad shit. Tell me the
Yeah.
negative stuff. And yet, if you look at my Instagram, or at least my book Instagram, it's full of a lot of shiny moments. So it's kind of the disparity, right? The desire to present to the world that, hey, like we got our shit together when on the inside, maybe we don't.
Yeah.
And so, part of the other reason that I wanted to write this book, it's a book called Joy in Plain Sight, celebrating stories and essays, celebrating wonder in the ordinary, is to share with others real vulnerable narratives that life is not perfect, that we have had near death experiences. We've had loved ones die. We've had a lot of shit in our lives that we kind of have to either carry or work through.
Yeah.
I think that's the power of human stories, of having conversations like these to, like you said, dissect, right?
I'm all about the dissection. I start hearing people talk and I'm like, I got to talk about this. I'm like, your presence is very striking, Katya. It's very striking. Like there's a lot of warmth and there's a lot of positivity. But it's funny. It feels like you've talked, I don't know how to say this better. I feel like you talk about this a lot. Like, it's almost a professional presentation of a person, but they're also very warm at the same time. And talk about dark stuff. It's throwing me off, man.
Okay. What about that makes you thrown off or slightly like off center?
Because I've known a lot of people who present like you do, and like I don't hear the bad stuff from them. It's like it's the toxic. It's like overly positive. I don't like that because I'm like, listen, everybody has flaws and things, and they're going through hard stuff. Those people I often see, like when I really get to know them on the back end, it's nothing like behind the curtain. It's messy. It's very messy.
Yeah.
And it's like people who are like really negative. It's like, come on. I mean, there's like good stuff. I mean, come on. It's like everything's bad. Like, so you're throwing me off because like you present a very positive personality, but you're also like, yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff that's happening. Like, and that's not common. I feel like this is a compliment. I don't want this to sound like this is like like, oh man, I'm just dogpiling on Katya. Like, no, it's just strange. I'm just telling you to me.
I like strange. Strange is good. We need more strangeness in this world.
I'm just being observational about it. It's good.
Yeah. Darren, I'd like to share a piece of feedback with you that I got early on in my leadership facilitation role where, and again, this is in light in kind of peeling back the layers, right, of this presentation. So I work as a leadership facilitator now. I teach managers, executives, individual contributors, leadership skills, which is such a blast, right? Like we get to go into all these wonderful organizations and hopefully change the thinking and the behaviors.
Yeah. And that's apparent. Like you're speaking, that's apparent. Like that's
And the feedback was, Katya, you sound too much like a facilitator and not enough as a human being.
Okay, hold on, stop you here. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story real quick.
Yeah, please.
Real quick. So I was in Colorado over the weekend with my family on a vacation. And we
Mhm.
went on this cave tour in Colorado Springs, Cave of the Winds tour. Big
Wow.
shout out.
Uh-huh.
Amazing thing. Our tour guide, okay, this says our tour guide was taking us through the caves. My wife looked at me, she goes, just feels like a theater act. Like, I don't know if this
Mhm.
guy's a real person. Like, I'm not sure what he
Mm.
actually would be like if he wasn't
Mhm.
like, it was like the intonation, the pitch, and
Mhm.
1,000 years ago, this
Mhm.
happened here. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, who are you? Like, this is a
Yeah.
theater. It was felt theatrical. Anyway, that's the story.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
get kind of that feedback a little bit. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's almost like there's a veneer on that person and you're like,
Yes.
what's behind it? Like, and it
What's
also, I
going
think
on?
that that type of veneer tends to decrease the trust in the other person
Right.
because you don't know how they actually are.
Yes.
Right. And that feels kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
So like similar to the feedback that your wife gave or shared with you about that cave
Hmm.
person, also shout out to Coast Springs, a beautiful place to be. I've climbed the Manitou stairs and it was amazing.
So amazing,
What a
right?
blast.
So
Yes.
cool. Yes.
Yes. What a thrill. Nearly died of like oxygen depletion, but that's part of it.
Yes.
Part of the feedback that I received early on in this career, or I guess in this role, is that like, Katya, you were coming across so polished because I
Mhm.
had done Toastmasters for 3 years. I had been in the positions of
It's
facilitating
making
for,
sense.
yeah, exactly. Now the puzzle pieces are clicking. But I had been in such like positions where perfection and polished
Mm.
appearance were the expectation. It was the norm. When I came to my organization, which is the best place that I've ever worked at, it was like, no, you're here to be human first, and then also share your knowledge, your content in a professional manner. And so I started experimenting after I received that feedback. I was like, what would it take for Katya to throw in like a shit
Mhm.
in a professional facilitation, right? In
Sure.
workshops that we give to clients. I was like, ooh, that feels spicy because that's authentic me. Like I love the occasional curse word, not just to use them willy-nilly, but
Sure.
because they just slip out. What would that feel like? What would it feel like for me to share a personal story in these ideas and these leadership ideas that we're trying to teach? And these personal stories that they don't relate to work, they relate
Yeah.
to life, drawing on those life lessons to then apply to work, to then apply to leadership development.
Yeah.
And over time, it was fascinating to see how much I was able to relax, where I didn't feel like I had to get it right 100% of the time, or to like show up as this, yes, I'm ready. It's 10 a.m. I'm about to go into my first workshop. I'm going to crush it. Right. Because that's also really heavy for the person
Yeah.
to upkeep, much like it's probably really heavy for the cave tour guide to say, we are here and we're excited to be
Yeah.
here. Right. Because it
Yeah. I think
doesn't
that
feel
person, when
real.
they're done with the tour and they walk away, they're like, oh. And
Uh-huh.
then like, I'm like, I want to meet that person. Like, I
Yeah.
want to meet the person who's not doing the tour.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just an interesting thing. It's like,
Yes.
I speak a lot myself, and it is a process of how are you mixing the person people see you watching TV or hanging out with your significant other versus this professional person,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So I think that there's the joy in that is
Yeah.
interesting. How do you come across their projection is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It just came
Mm-hmm.
to me very quickly. As soon as we got on, I was like, this is going to be different.
I so appreciate that,
It's going to be
Darian. That's
different.
yeah, yeah. And I think that like I'm hopeful about this type of more authentic relating, more authentic showing
Mhm.
up in the workplace to any interaction, in that even the vernacular that we use in the workplace of previously it was work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
You went to work 9 to 5, you came back, you had life. Now it's sort of becoming work-life integration. Now, a lot of companies, a lot of employees are moving towards this trend of how can I bring my full human self into the workplace?
Mhm.
And I think that's fascinating
Yeah.
because what is life if we can't fully bring our full selves in?
Right.
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 Again, I also recognize that I speak from a place of privilege where by the way, by my physical appearance, by your
Mm.
initial perception, you're like, oh, yep, you might be speaking from a place of privilege. I own that, you know, and I also recognize that it's not easy for everybody to show up as their full selves in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so that's also something that I like to think about in the
Yeah.
background. How does our invisible disabilities, our sort of our learning styles, the way that we show up, how does that relate to who we can be,
Yeah.
versus what we
I
can be?
really thought like meeting you is like, it's the professionalism. They
Mm.
seem like a very professional person, which is a
Mhm.
really positive quality. I mean,
Yeah.
but I also like immaturity a little bit.
The
Like,
goofiness, the
yeah,
dad
I
jokes,
don't
the
know. There's something
puns.
about it. Like, I don't want people to be too mature,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
like
Yes.
too put together.
Right.
Kind of
Darren, that
enjoy,
makes me think,
you know.
yeah, that makes me think of the concept of play. Like,
Yeah.
how do we play as adults? And as someone who's like, who knows so much about the body,
Mhm.
who knows so much about like how to be healthy, I'm really curious to actually ask you, how do you either personally, professionally, from the folks that you've talked to,
Yeah.
how do you incorporate play into your everyday?
Again, I think a big part of it is just not taking myself too seriously. Like, I have a
Mm.
lot of education, and I
Mhm.
purposely make sure that I don't come across as this like person as a doctorate
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
higher than other people. No, like I've
Mhm.
done all this stuff. I'm just like, no. Like, I just want to be very relatable.
Mhm.
Playfulness to me is relatability to people.
Mm.
If I could just go out, if I could sit down with somebody and just shoot the breeze about anything, like literally
Mhm.
anything,
Mhm.
and I could just whatever tell a person anything about me. I am an open book. I will talk about anything about
Mhm.
my life. So
Mhm.
it's like, hey, this is who it is, man. So what it is
Yeah.
here, you know. That's
Right.
playful
Right.
to me. What's hard to
Mm.
me is if someone presents themselves in a way where I'm like, there's like this armor in front of them, and I'm just trying to
Mhm.
chink away, like, what the hell is happening underneath here? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
okay. So like, I think just letting, like when I work with my clients, I'm like, hey, listen, you don't have to hide anything from me. You could tell me
Mhm.
anything you want. I'm not going to judge you. In fact, if it's very messy, I'll probably be really into it. Honestly, I
Mm.
probably will.
Mhm.
Like, I'm
Yes.
like, we're
Yes.
not shooting for perfection here. We're shooting
Mhm.
for just be yourself, and whatever that
Yeah.
means. As long as it's nothing like destructive,
Mhm.
between us and other people, it's probably just fine. You know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. On the concept of perfection, I will again own up to it. I was raised as a perfectionist. Like
Mm.
if it wasn't an A, it wasn't acceptable.
Who was this from? Who instilled
My
this?
parents.
Your parents? Yeah.
You know, my parents, myself, of course, the high
Yeah.
expectations of being the only immigrant, child, the one who was kind of, whether explicitly or implicitly, was to carry on the legacy. And I put this in air
Yeah.
quotes because it's just like, wow, no pressure. Just go ahead and be successful. You got
Yeah.
this.
No problem.
Right. And similar to you, right? Like have the education, have the
Yeah.
professional experiences, and like, and so what?
Mhm.
How is that going to matter when I'm 111 on my deathbed? I was like, oh, I'm so glad I got straight A's in high
I
school, college, and
know.
grad school. Yay, go me. Right? Like, who cares?
No
No
one
one
cares
gives a
about
shit
that.
about that.
No.
And yet it's so hard because our society also socializes us to focus on those tangible metrics,
Right.
right? The numbers. Our brains get drawn to the numbers. Oh, you got a 4.0? Amazing. You're automatically in this quote unquote better class than someone who got a 3.0.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit,
That
right?
is.
I've had so much of that learning drilled into me by myself, by,
Yeah.
educational institutions, by my parents, by my peers who were also in this high achieving world, that now it's the process of unlearning.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
It is hard.
Like to unlearn the patterns that have existed for decades.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's my next challenge is how
That's
do
the
I,
challenge.
peel back those layers, cut the
Yeah.
threads that have kept me kind of marionetted in this,
Yeah.
perfectionistic tendency and see what comes
I think
out.
the other thing, like with you, is like I see a lot of myself
Mm.
growing up and
Mhm.
my early academic career
Mhm.
and things, and then I see like the last 5 years, I'm 44, of
Mhm.
like really like letting go and like being less
Mm.
polished, like
Mhm.
as I feel that's maybe that's the strangeness for me, is I'm like it's like it's just throwing me off, because like if you ever see yourself in someone else, it's weird, kind of.
It
And
is.
when you
It
when
is.
also you feel that you never see yourself a lot in other people.
Mhm.
Like I never
Mhm.
see me in other people almost
Mm.
ever.
Aw, it's
So when
adorable.
I see I'm like, this is kind of strange.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Hello, I'm Darian from
I
another
know.
life
Hello.
in this body.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, and it's always just two ends of the spectrum. Someone who's like very polished and I can't relate to them. Forget it.
Mhm,
I'm not in.
mhm.
Someone
Yeah.
who's very unpolished is not trying to move towards maybe more polished. I'm not really into that either. But it's like,
Mhm.
it's different when somebody is presenting to two sides. It's like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Darian, if you had to turn back the clock, let's say 14 years.
Yeah.
So Darian at age 30,
Mhm.
what kind of kindness would you have wanted to give yourself? And I say kindness for a reason because, there's advice that you can give
Yeah.
yourself. There is like self-compassion, but what kind of kindness and or self-compassion would you have given yourself when you were 30, when you were still kind of beginning
Yeah.
to maybe unravel who you are?
Yeah. I think just kinder to myself about like I had just finished my doctorate at like 29.
Mhm.
So it's this really long journey. It was really hard on myself about
Yeah.
it. And I wish I wasn't so hard on myself about it.
Mm.
Like it was so like
Mhm.
obsessed with getting it done, which was good. I got it done. It
Mhm.
was a hard thing. I wish I would
Mhm.
have been, I was more kind to myself about enjoying like the
Mm.
process. Like I wish I had a bigger celebration about it. I had like a nice
Yeah.
one, but like
Yeah.
now when I do stuff, I like want to have huge parties. Like I want to
Mm.
like massive ragers, blow out keggers. Like that's what I'm doing. I'm sorry, that's how it is. I'm
Love
like,
it. Please
I
invite me to your
mean,
next one because that
I
sounds
would do a keg
amazing.
stand right now. I'm telling you right now, I do a keg stand.
Oh my
It's not for
gosh.
people in their 20s. Come on. Like,
It's for
you know,
people in there
it's
every
for
year.
people who's living. Like,
Yes.
well, I would like, I'm
Yes.
really into ceremony. I wish I would have been more kind to myself about
Mm.
ceremony, like making the ceremony big. I feel like we try to
Mhm.
destroy transitions in life.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
need to get back to more transitions. Like, hey, pump
Mhm.
up, find the joy and celebration. Is like
Mhm.
you have a limited run. This is a limited Netflix series, your life. It's a very
Yes.
limited series. There may be
Yes.
6 chapters, maybe 8. I don't know. It depends.
Right.
like,
Right.
like let's
Exactly.
enjoy this show. Let's get crazy, man. Let's like,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I did
Yeah.
that most of my 30s. I was like, boom, explode. And my 40s has been a little more laid back, but I mean, I still want to rip it up. And
Mhm.
I think I just would have been more celebratory about that time in my life for sure.
Mm. Yeah. That makes me think of something that my dear mother instilled in me from when I was young is the necessity to celebrate at least birthdays, right? Like
Yeah.
we celebrated a lot of things, not we weren't like really religious growing up, but we liked to gather to have a good meal,
Yeah.
to sit down, to spend time with family. And as a kid, you're just like, well, I just want to play. Like, like let
Yeah.
me leave the dining room table. I just want to
Yeah.
get out there and play. And I remember growing up, like my mother would always insist on using the best china for
Yeah.
our morning coffee. I'm like, we can use the mugs that are already readily accessible in our cupboard. She's like, no, 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 let's bring out the finest china. And I think that's such a beautiful way to view life that it's even within the everyday, right? Whether it's a birthday or just, hey, it's another Sunday to
Yeah.
get out that fine china, to use all the beautiful things. I say this and a memory floats up of my partner and I have 3 cats, and we celebrated their 6th birthdays on Halloween, and they just turned 6, and it's so ludicrous, right? Like the cats don't
uh,
know what's happening to them. They don't know
no,
that they're 6.
no.
They're so cute, but they're so silly. But then, my partner and I put on little party hats. I got
Yeah.
them little containers of food. I gave them each a candle. We lit them. We sang
Did
happy
you put this
birthday.
on Instagram? Did you put
I think I posted a photo, but like I wanted to be so present in the moment that I'm like, I forgot to record it. And we sang them happy birthday by like singing in meow. So meow,
Yeah.
meow, 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 meow.
Yeah.
Ridiculous, right? Like absolutely ludicrous. But it's something that we remember,
Yeah.
right? It's one of
Yeah.
those memories that we keep coming back to that's like, oh wow, that was the weirdest and the best time because it was so playful, because it was so out of the side of our, adult
Sure.
shells.
Yeah. No, I'm happy you didn't put on Instagram. Oh, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Oh.
yeah. No. Like just I don't know. It's like I feel like you should have stuff for yourself. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't have any of that, but like I most of my life is an experience that most people will never see. That's my
Mm.
life. Like
Yeah.
you'll find a lot about my podcast. You look me up, nothing but
Mhm.
podcasts. But
Mhm.
like how like my vacation in Colorado, you'll never see those pictures unless you're close to
Mm.
me, type of
Yeah.
thing. You know,
Yes. Yes.
Just,
What do you see as the value of kind of bifurcating, the podcast versus professional experience versus your own?
yeah. I just think that like, it's like taking a picture of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Like the picture, unless it's like a crazy good lens, or even then, it just sucks compared to being there. Like
Yeah.
it's no good. Like
Mm-hmm.
and like sometimes you take the picture, like, why am I taking this picture? Like, what's the lived experience
Yeah.
for that? I think for
Yeah.
me is like, one, I want the why I separate that is, one, those are really personal times for me.
Mm-hmm.
My vacation time with
Mm-hmm.
my family, my hanging out with my buddies. I mean, I have
Mm-hmm.
thousands of pictures and videos of hanging out with my buddies, bowling leagues and stuff,
Mm.
crazy nights. Only
Yeah.
we see it,
Yeah.
because not because we're so private, but because it's like, well, we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
send stuff to people I don't know, like
Yeah.
about that personal stuff, type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. So, there can be two sides. I'm very transparent, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing that for the joy of just the joy of like doing it, or is the joy of attention?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Some
Mm-hmm.
people enjoy attention a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe that's not the authentic joy you want. It's just
Right.
validate me type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
that's weird to me, honestly.
Yeah. It's that little burst of dopamine when you have
Yeah.
another little heart on Instagram, or, the little
Yeah.
plus one on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah. For what reason are we posting? Right.
Why
To
are we
share
posting?
authentically. Yeah.
Right. Why are we
Or for that
posting? Like for
attention.
me, I post like my podcast. I'm very selfish about it. My podcast is about me. I'm doing it for my personal education with
Mhm.
other
And you say
people.
that
I
too.
say
Like
it
it's in the description.
exactly. I don't
Yeah.
BS people. I don't
Hmm.
go, well, yeah, this is for my business leads and all this stuff. It's blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is for me. And if
Hmm.
you choose to listen to it, I'll put it out there. You can hear Katya talk, us talk
Hmm.
about stuff, me saying she's throwing me off, all this stuff. Like, it's
Yeah,
great.
I listened to your episode with Andy Chan this morning about like Chinese medicine.
Love Andy,
I was
man.
like, yeah, I found that fascinating because he was saying something, or at least what I perceived from it is like we have the traditional, the Western medicine,
Yes.
and then Eastern or Chinese medicine is like, well, what is this stuff? This is not robust. This is not
Right.
medically proven. But I'm like, what's
Yeah.
the feeling behind it?
What's the
Right?
feeling? The
How do you
chi.
feel after,
Right.
exactly
I
the
want to
chi?
learn. I want to learn from
Mhm.
people. I really want to,
Mhm.
I drink in everything from other
Mhm.
people and then make a decision about it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I want to put that out there. Like, hey, I'm learning. You should learn, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah.
Mhm.
But, I mean, do I need to put, videos of me like bowling and falling over? Like, probably not. I mean,
Unless you want to teach other people that it's okay to completely bomb at bowling,
yeah, I mean, I
then
don't
that
know,
could be it.
maybe, but then it's like, why am I getting my camera out in that moment? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I
Mhm.
just like want to be there. I
Yes.
just want to party and be there.
Yes. Yes. Darian, and the other side of the coin is how do you remember these experiences? If you don't, post about them to
Yeah,
socials, how do you still remember them? Because, over time our brains forget. So I'm curious about
right.
your like retention method.
I do have like pictures and videos, but like I keep them to myself like
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
but also like if something has a super strong, I try to go for very super strong emotional feelings about things. And those are memories you always remember, type of
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
just don't like this whole thing of like, if you didn't post it, it didn't happen. That's so
Mm-hmm.
stupid.
Mm-hmm. People
Guys,
say it
I
sarcastically,
can't
but now
say
it's
it.
true.
It's so stupid. Listen, I'm gonna say it again. Stop telling that to people. If it didn't post it, it didn't happen. Of course
Yeah.
it happened. Well, you don't
Mhm.
need evidence of everything to make sure it was true. It's a lot of mystery
Yeah.
in life. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Yeah.
totally okay. And some stuff,
Absolutely.
if I don't remember it, it's okay too. Honestly, it's,
Mm.
it's really okay.
Oh, I love
Like,
that. Yeah, there's beauty in letting go, right?
it's
Opening
fine.
oneself up for other experiences.
I mean, there's lots of stuff in my daughter's life that, she's 10 and I just forget some of the stuff that happened. I look at a picture of her and go, oh man, that was amazing. But it's not like I'm thinking about it every day. I mean, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's really
Yeah.
okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
not everything needs to be documented. Like,
That's true. That goes against like I like to document because I have this maybe an unresolved fear of forgetting, because I want
Yeah.
to remember as much of life as possible, because like you said, it's a limited series run on
Yeah.
Netflix. So I've gotten into the habit over the last decade or so to write in a journal, which I know a lot of people do,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah.
whatever form.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a digital journal, your photos, maybe it's an actual physical journal.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, my friend gifted me a 5-year journal, which is 1
5 years.
line on a page and it has space for 5 different years. So you
Oh,
collect these little snippets of memory, and it can be the most mundane shit, right? Like,
yeah.
I went outside today, I had a bagel today, whatever it may be. But over time, you have that little collection of, wow,
Yeah.
there's so much wonder in these 5
Yeah.
years.
Okay.
So
If there is a Netflix series made about you, what would it be called? Like, what would it be?
this is I guess, a new one, right? Not an
It's
existing
a
one.
new story. There's a new series. Maybe is it a documentary? Is it like a live acted, like acted, put on
Mhm.
drama? Is it
Mhm.
a movie? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, yeah. I am partial to a mockumentary
a
similar to,
mockumentary.
yes,
I
yes,
like that.
similar to like The Office, because we know that it's scripted. You have the boom man coming in,
That's
but
good.
also, yeah, it's also those real moments where I watched The Office many times and years ago, but it's just silly enough where we see all the hijinks and the
Yeah.
weird things that go on in office. Um, and also it's people doing their
Yeah.
everyday lives in a boring office in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'd love to, well, first of all, I hate the idea of a mockumentary being made about me. Like, no, no, thank you. That sounds
Really?
awful. Yes. Because I like you, I like to listen. And even though it's ironic that I'm talking about myself now, oh, the irony. Um, I don't want the spotlight to be on me. I want the spotlight to be on human stories. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if we could zoom in to the perspective of a chair? Personify that. What would a chair think? What would this mic think of it constantly getting pummeled by my little spittle, by my
Yeah.
voice? Like, what does
Yeah.
it think? So maybe something like the life of inanimate objects in our daily world,
Interesting.
part one.
I think it'd be great to watch a mockumentary about you where you were like doing like a Toastmasters or you were speaking to a bunch of people at Netflix, right? Like you do.
Yes.
And then you came off the stage and you were like smoked a 6 pack of cigarettes or something like that. Like it was like, wow, what's going on here? Like,
Can you imagine? No,
you're
I'd
just
probably
doing
like do handstands because that's my thing. I do a lot of
okay.
handstands.
You
So
got off stage, you're like, give me a shot, Jimmy. And I'm just like, wow,
exactly.
like it
Just pound
just
it back.
whatever, just like it's very polished on the front and there's something else going on. So I'm like,
But I think that's the cool thing, right? Like seeing all those unsexy moments
yeah,
of like, in my book, I wrote a story about farting in my bathroom,
yeah,
as one does, right? Because
yeah,
again, I want to
sure.
normalize
It's a
like
big deal.
bodily functions.
Yeah,
And the way that our house is laid out, I live in an apartment. It's a fourplex, so there's 4 apartments, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. The way that our bathrooms are laid out is you can hear everything from
yeah,
the other bathrooms because they all converge.
yeah.
I farted, and then I hear, "Bless you." And I was like, what? Like, what
Yeah,
just happened? And I was
thin
like,
walls, man.
right, exactly. Very thin walls. And I'm like, thank you. And they're like, welcome to the neighborhood. Cause I had just moved
Wow.
into that place. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that's a story, you know?
Better be careful what else you're doing in there.
I know. Just like I'm putting my Spotify playlist on high. I'm like,
Yeah,
please
it's like put it
don't
on.
listen.
Sexy music on right now.
Exactly. Maybe I should put a playlist of like fart sounds just to throw the neighbors
Yeah,
off, just like
yeah,
continual farting.
yeah.
Could be a fun
Man,
experiment.
interesting. The mockumentary is good. I didn't see that coming. I definitely didn't see that coming. I think
The
it would be,
element of
I would watch
surprise.
it. And I wouldn't
Thank you.
watch most mockumentaries. I think they're dumb, but I
Mhm,
would watch
mhm.
yours.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's the joy that I'm taking for today. I'm going to write it down in my little journal. Dr.
Yeah.
Darian Parker is going to watch the supposed mockumentary on farts and things.
I would watch it because I'm just so thrown off. It would be very interesting. It would just
Aw.
be like a great journey into exploration. And
Mm, mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
it would just be fun.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would want my Netflix, I want mine to be a series, like 6 episodes, no more than 6. Can't
Mhm.
handle much more than that.
Well,
And
what would be the central premise?
I think becoming me.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Because it took a
your
long
life.
time for me to become me. Like that
Yeah.
person was always there, but it
Mhm.
struggled a long time to get out. like a long time. And
Yeah.
I think that you kind of know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you struggle to like discover that person and like,
Yeah.
and then to say, hey, this is me. And then that you're good with it. And in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, it's sometimes hard to let that person out,
Yeah. Yeah. For you, was it a catalyst? Was there like one defining moment where you're like, oh snap, this is me. This is the Darian Parker versus like a gradual set of years of time of reflection?
Yeah, for sure. It was like when I was in college and I took basic counseling skills,
Mm-hmm.
and we were required to have a therapist as well with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took public speaking as well. This was like my first 2 years in college.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the real me started, like speaker started, like the very social me was, that was like painfully shy in high school. It was
Wow.
painfully shy.
Would
I
not have
know,
expected that.
becoming me. Exactly.
Right. Right.
And I was like, man, I need to get this out. I need to become the person I want to be. This like more
Mhm.
outgoing, more fun, rip it up person, but also be like serious, things I
Mhm.
need to be serious about.
Mhm.
And so that really helped me break out. And I just basically threw myself to the wolves. I was like, this is not going to happen unless I push myself really far and be
Mhm.
uncomfortable. I mean, it's a cliche.
Mhm.
Don't be uncomfortable. Honestly, I kind of
Yeah.
hate when people say that, but it's like, it's so cliche. There's no growth in comfort. I know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like,
I've been there.
I know, but it's like,
Yeah.
you have to like push yourself. And it's the same thing with
Mhm.
training or whatever it is. There's an element of being really like uncomfortable. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not sure, like doubt. Doubt's not a bad thing, I don't think.
Mhm.
I think it's like you get to points where you doubt yourself. You've really tested yourself when you start doubting
Mhm.
yourself. I believe
Yeah.
in that test for
Mm.
people.
Mhm. Becomes the sort of opportunity for us to lean in and listen even more of where
Yes.
that doubt's coming from, where it can go.
Yeah.
Darian, your comment reminded me a little bit of there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes.
Love the concept of habits,
I'm
how to build
familiar
them.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And something that he mentioned in his book that really resonated with me was the people who are successful or the people who get ahead are not necessarily the ones who keep going, not
Yeah.
necessarily the ones who like put in the long hours, who, yes, that is true. And also, maybe more accurately, it's the people who are willing to withstand the pain of doing the same shit, putting in the
Yeah.
same work day after day, no matter how grinding or terrible or uncomfortable it feels.
Hmm.
So it's like, how much pain are you willing to withstand to make
Yeah.
something happen? To become you,
Becoming
right?
me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Becoming me. That's totally my thing. It's like I
Yeah.
spent a lifetime learning to become myself for
Mm.
that. And obviously I'm still evolving and changing. I'm pushing. This is the purpose of my podcast is to continue that journey
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
like be a sponge and drink up everyone else, like just like enhance myself,
Mm-hmm.
upgrade myself through talking to other people
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
creating these long-term relationships, these connections. And once you're in the network, you're in the network. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to contact you again. We're going to chat, the whole thing. It's a web. You're going to the
Yes.
web.
Right.
So I think that's part of the joy for me is the
Mm-hmm.
connection, but also there's a lot of joy. This sounds weird. There's a lot of joy in testing yourself. And
Yes.
the conflict is good because it pushes you. It should push
Mm-hmm.
you towards a greater version of what you want to
Mm-hmm.
be. If it's always
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, this is what's good about that. Like, it's
Exactly.
fun to be, have comfort and nice things, but like, it's okay to like really, really push yourself. Sometimes in our society right now, we're focused on like joy, 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 which is great, but like, let's not have discomfort, like,
Mm-hmm.
or let's not have someone lose.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven forbid somebody loses a soccer game for a little kid. It's
Yeah.
okay to lose.
Yes.
Like,
Losing is normal.
losing
Let's
happens
celebrate
in
it.
life. And
Yeah.
then you get to celebrate when you win. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can you
Mm-hmm.
celebrate if you win all the time or if it's just average? It's like, I don't know. I don't get
Yeah.
that. I just
Yeah.
don't get that.
And losing, there's a lot of this concept of cognitive reappraisal, the way that we think
Mm,
about things, like the mindset principle, right? The
yeah.
way that our mindset is, that's the way that our reality is. That's what we started talking about today.
Yes.
I think that we can help ourselves get through loss or get through failure by reappraising it as, well, what is this an opportunity for me to learn from?
Yeah.
You know, and yet at the same time, also feel the sting of that loss. So we're not saying, oh, it's not a loss. It's
Yeah.
just, I'm going to do better. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But also there's the
Yeah.
other uncomfortable truth that losing sucks. Like it
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be tears, there's going to be hurt feelings. And we have these two kind of almost
Yeah.
paradoxical truths. And we get to hold them within
Right.
ourselves, within each other.
And there's joy in that. I feel like there's
Mhm.
joy in that because
Mhm.
there's joy in the come up and the comeback and all these things. You
Yes.
know, I think we have to like look at those things in a different. I just like looking at things in a different way, and I like
Mhm.
calling
Mhm.
out things in an inquisitive way. It's kind of
Yes.
like when I'm gonna come back to this again. You came on and start talking. I'm like, okay, I have to say this. What's going
Yep.
on here?
Let me
Not a bad.
spew my professionalism at you first, Darian, and then
Yeah,
have you
yeah.
kind of
It's not a
unveil
bad
it.
thing. I want to preface
Yeah,
this again. It's not
of
a bad thing.
course.
It's just when I get thrown off by something, I just can't let it go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you
Mm-hmm.
came on and you had like two horns in your head, a lot of people would be like, I'm just gonna ignore this. I don't want to like go there. I'd be like, what's that on your head? Like,
Tell me the story of your
like
two
I'm not
horns.
gonna spend this whole hour like looking at the top of your head and not like point out the obvious thing that's going on here. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
what's up with those
absolutely.
horns? I'm like,
That's why I'm wearing my hair down, Darian, so you can't see my horns underneath my hair.
okay.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Yeah. Katya would be, I think, a very good person to just like, if you went to a bar and somebody was just sitting there next to you and you didn't know them, you would end up talking to Katya for like 3 hours probably
Oh
afterward.
my gosh. I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much because like that's actually happened. Anytime that I go to a
Mm.
bar by myself, I just
Yeah.
start talking to people
Yeah. You're
because
that
like,
person.
yeah, every stranger is a friend in disguise.
Yeah. See, I knew it.
What,
I
right?
totally knew it. It's like,
Or at
oh
least has the
man.
potential to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just wonderful. You're a wonderful person, Katya.
Mm.
I really
Oh,
appreciate the time you gave me to just learn about you and have a
oh my
discussion.
gosh.
Life's better when we talk to each other. It really is.
Yes, I
We
agree.
have to
Darren,
talk
thank
to each
you.
other.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for providing the space and the vivacity. I'm just like bouncing on my calves right now. I'm just so jazzed up by our conversation. And I'm so grateful that you craft these intentional spaces for what
Yeah,
I think vulnerable human
right. I
conversations
know we
really
didn't talk
are.
about your book a lot and stuff. Like, I really never get to that type of stuff with people. I'm like, let's just like let it be weird, man. Let's just let
Yeah.
it go where it's gonna
Ooh,
go.
I
I guess. Who
love that.
cares?
Let it be weird. That's
Just
a
let it be
good life
weird.
motto.
Let it
Mhm.
be right. Just let it be weird. Like it's
Yeah.
okay. Like it's really, I just want to give people permission to just like fade into whatever it is, man. Long as it's not
Mhm.
destructive, harming a
Mhm.
lot of other people, you
Mhm.
know, that type of stuff I'm not into. I don't think there's
Exactly.
boundaries. You have to set boundaries in life. But if it's
Of
just like,
course.
kind of weird, hanging out, you
Mhm.
like to do that. Okay, let's talk about it. I mean, it's pretty
Yes.
fun.
Yes.
Like,
Doing a little dance, getting jiggy with it, all these
yes,
things.
yes, yes.
I often dance in my workshops when I'm presenting. I'm like, all right, folks, welcome back from the break. If
Really?
you use that break to dance, I did too. I had a one woman dance party and usually gets a few laughs and be
Do you
like,
start dancing
oh,
actually? Do you
I
start
do. I
dancing?
actually like do this because I always put on a good playlist.
Like the head
So I start
bob?
like bopping. I start
Yeah.
like, the duck thing, the
The
duck
duck thing?
move. That's
Yeah.
what I call
Yeah.
it. Who knows what it is actually called, but it's fun. It's levity. It's
Uh,
unexpected, right? It's the
it's
delightful
unexpected.
surprise.
Yeah. This is
Mhm.
great. This is fantastic.
Likewise.
Katya,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much
much.
for
Tell
having me.
everybody
I will.
about where to get the book, how to connect with you, the whole deal. Yeah.
Awesome. I would love for you to, if you're wondering about a little sparkle of joy, the book is called Joy in Plain Sight, Stories and Essays Celebrating Wonder in the Ordinary. It's available now in Amazon, on Barnes& and Noble, anywhere you buy books, soon to be available in Los Angeles bookstores. So if y'all are ever in LA, please holler, say hi. I'm on Instagram for my professional bookstagram at Joy in Plain Sight. But I would also love to hear from you. Welcome to visit my website, katyadavydova.com. There's a contact form there, or just DM me on Instagram. I genuinely like, if this struck a chord, if you disagree with it, if you challenge it, if you resonate with it, please reach out. Best way to do it, Instagram, join Plain Sight, or via my website, katyadavydova.com, or LinkedIn. That's another big one I check. But thanks, y'all.
Fantastic.
Darren, so grateful for you to
Thank
provide
you.
this opportunity to connect. It's
Of
been such a
course.
joy.
Of course. Everyone, Katya, awesome.
Oh,
All right.
thank
Thanks for
you.
your time.
Thank you. Thank you.